The future has arrived. As the world and humanity itself moves faster and faster into unimaginable possibilities, old institutions that built connection and shaped our sense of meaning are falling by the wayside. In their wake, profound questions about ethics, our purpose, and spirituality demand new answers. Join your host, Scott Mason, in Season 2 of the Purpose Highway podcast. We will explore how these social changes will revolutionize our society. We will learn how they impact our own search for connection and meaning. And we will hear stories of influencers whose lives have had radical change from the inside and found profound connection to others and themselves through a new definition of meaning. The future has arrived. Are you ready?
When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's itsnola.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is. Hello everybody, it's Scott Mason revving up for another race down the Purpose Highway. If you like what we're doing, be sure to subscribe and give us a thumbs up on YouTube or review on Apple. Now, sitting next to me today in the front seat is Laura Staley. Laura is the founder of Cherish Your World. She supports people thriving in physical spaces where they live and work and in their lives. Laura writes personal essays focused on self-discovery, emotional intelligence, and transformations from the inside out. Laura is the published author of 3 books: Live Inspired, Let Go Courageously, and Live with Love, Transform Your Life with Feng Shui, and the Cherish Your World gift book of 100 tips to enhance your home and your life. Laura, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's amazing to be here with you.
Thank you. I'm going to start by asking you a fundamental question. Why does the space that we live in matter from a spiritual or purpose-driven perspective? It's my house. I decorate it. I put in what I need to. Why am I wasting my time talking about feng shui and where I put my bed?
It's a great question. Because we now know from neuroscience that where we place a desk or a bed actually has us calm in our nervous system or in fight flight. If you've got your back to the door, Scott, your body registers fight flight. Even if you may not be 100% conscious of that, it does that. Mm-hmm. So think of a CEO, think of a principal in a principal's office. They don't ever put their back to, or if they are, my encouragement is to switch that around so they can have a view of the door. You get a better night's sleep when you've got a view of the door, and you get more productive and creative flow when you've got a view of the door and a wall behind your back, because that's got your back, so to speak. In my case, I've got trees behind my back in my office, and that serves as my energetic anchor to my creative expression and my productivity. So it could look like a whole lot of trees at your back. Space matters because it's either distracting us, we're stumbling over it, we might even getting our shins cut on things that we're bumping into. The clutter could be stagnating domains of our life, whether it's our love life, our work life, our creative expression, why we're here, our wisdom that we're gleaning. A lot of people in our culture will stuff their garages with belongings, for instance. And often that happens to be in the knowledge and self-cultivation area in the world of Feng Shui. And boy, if you can't get that deep clarity about who you are, you could have incredible financial abundance flow into your life, for instance, right? But if you don't make good choices from that clarity and your core values, wow, right? We hear those stories of people being bankrupt a year later after winning the lottery. Mm-hmm, who wants that? Mm-hmm. And it's being represented. So your space is actually a metaphor for exactly what's happening in your life. Good, bad, indifferent. Mm-hmm. Have at it.
We're going to talk in a little bit more detail about that. It's interesting philosophically and it's interesting in theory, but I won't lie, I'm a little bit skeptical. But before we get into my skepticism, I would like to know a little bit more about you. How'd you even get involved in this? Is this what you thought you'd be from the time you were a little girl, or did something happen in your life that led this to be something you feel such passion about?
Oh my gosh. So, great question. I actually had, it goes way back, but I'll start from the flood of our finished basement that happened. Because basically, prior to this flood, I related to the belongings in my space as stuff. And a lot of people do, right? It's just stuff, whatever, right?
What'd you do for a living? Where did you live? Like, were you living in a suburban house?
At that juncture, I had completed teaching at Ohio Wesleyan University as an assistant professor of political science. I had earned a PhD in political science at The Ohio State University. Highly educated. I chose consciously to be a full-time parent. I knew I wanted that. And it was a creation, of course, at that time in the context of the marriage.
Right.
My kids were little and I was a full-time mom. So the flood of the finished basement happened, Scott. And we lost, it was Valentine's night of 2020, and we lost so many things. We just didn't haul them out. We just couldn't haul them out fast enough. Mm-hmm. Right. And a month later, out of that, and we were still kind of like renovating and doing all the things that you have to do when you've had this flood of the finished basement. We had a ranch. I was with a former sister-in-law who at that time, she was a family member, but she had this book, The Western Guide to Feng Shui Room by Room by Tara Catherine Collins. And she was talking so excitedly. I had no idea. What is this Feng Shui chop suey? No, it's your space. It's the quality of your life. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I open it and it says, live with belongings that you love. And I'm like, wait, it's stuff. What? But I'm intrigued, Scott. I read the book cover to cover and it completely resonates. Right. And she said, take it with you, take it on the plane back home. I walk back into my house and I look around and I have the most phenomenal aha moment because I see hand-me-downs everywhere that I loathe. And Scott, they include my clothing and jewelry, furniture, artwork. It was all somebody else's tastes and preferences. Who was I? Right. And so in that moment, I had the deeper aha, which was, who am I? What's my voice? What's my passion? Like I had adopted all these other scripts of other people, including earning the PhD. I'm proud of that PhD. I'm proud of the teaching I did at Ohio Wesleyan, but it was not my deepest purpose for being on the planet.
Well, and that's interesting because I think Actually, I'll step back. From personal experience, I didn't go to law school out of love for the law. I had an interest in public policy. I was urged by those who I respected at the time in the strongest terms possible to go to law school right out of college. And I didn't really want to. I wanted to take 2, maybe 1 year off to really be sure that that was the right thing to do. But there was pressure that was put on me by certain individuals to do so. And rather than having the inner strength to resist that and just do what I wanted to do, I just went ahead and did it. And I ended up practicing law for many, many years based on ultimately what other people thought my life script should be. And it took me a long time, a very, very challenging and difficult journey to claw my way out of there so that I could eventually write my own script. I can relate to that. But it took me being miserable in my job as well as having some career derailments that led me to that place. Why do you think we are so susceptible to those scripts? And is there anything about you or someone that might be watching or listening that may be a risk factor that those scripts are something that they might be following without even realizing it, just like I was?
Oh, absolutely. It's expectations, Scott. I mean, I had huge expectations coming in from both my parents, other family members who are highly educated people. And I love that I'm a highly educated woman. I love that I'm a lifelong learner. But in that tension of wanting to please, it's kind of like maybe part of you wanted to please or wanted to fit in, or you wanted to belong and be accepted by those people who said you ought to go to law school. I had that same thing going on about you ought to be a professor, or you ought to be, and then it would shift, and you ought to be a senator. You ought to be a public servant. Well, you ought to serve the homeless. I mean, it was constantly changing. And I think
that's
why
challenging.
Why the struggle is there is we're struggling at the core of ourselves to either belong to ourselves and our true core reason for being on the planet, or pleasing other people. And I just heard recently that the 2 fatal limiting beliefs are feeling responsible for other people's emotions and feeling, what was the other one? It just escaped me. Not wanting to disappoint anyone. Wow. So I think those 2 limiting beliefs, sometimes if they're not discerned and brought out into the open, they can just be the drivers that we're not even looking at. Because
it's interesting, though.
I didn't want to disappoint my dad, and maybe you didn't want to disappoint those people who said, Scott, you've got skills and gifts that you'll just thrive in the world of law.
I think that people pleasing is out there a lot, and I do think it's endemic in our culture. It's interesting, though. I want to throw something else out there as a potential cause for that. Of the many things that I've been called in my life, people pleaser really hasn't been one of the top ones.
Right.
And I've been called a lot of other things.
Right.
Just not that. Yeah, that being said, I will throw out there another potential cause, and I would love to hear your take on it.
Yeah.
Either intellectual or emotional laziness. I think that's what it was with me. It was easier for me to have other people say, this is what you're good at, therefore that's what you should do, and not have to intellectually dissect it or to go through the hard work of digging within and figuring out who I was. Perhaps of the 2 that you were talking about earlier, not knowing purpose, in my case was more of the limiting belief or the challenge that I was having my purpose dictated to me by other people, and it was easier to just sort of go with that flow than to think it through myself. That being said, to the extent then that space, and since you did mention this earlier, I'm going to throw it back at you, and maybe you can talk to me a little bit how this would apply to someone like me. To the extent that space is a manifestation or a metaphor for who we are, if you're someone like me that wasn't on top of what their purpose was, or was needing space to find it, but it just seemed easier to have someone tell you when to do it now. What advice would you give to them about examining their space or thinking about the relationship of space versus someone who might be a people pleaser?
Yeah, that's great. So I really heard that it could be emotional laziness, like you just haven't been willing to do the deep internal work and self-reflection to get in touch with what it is that you want to do and what your life is about. So how it can show up in space is a heck of a lot of clutter in office. It might show up as clutter in bathroom, bedroom. And that usually is a symbol or points to struggles in relationships with people or with yourself, right? Any kind of clutter, actually, any form of clutter, whether it's an artifact of unfinished business, an unloved one, a wandering nomad that has no place in the bathroom for the purpose of the bathroom, or it's in the kitchen, and it causes confusion and stress. Right? I mean, I have ridiculous examples, but you'd be surprised what people put in different places, and it causes them confusion and a lack of clarity. It's kind of like having a lawnmower in your kitchen, and you go in there and you're not going to cook dinner that night, right? Or having so many dishes stacked up in the sink that you're not willing to cook dinner that night. It's time for carry out again, right? And yet you think, wow, finances and not connecting the dots that to cook yourself a healthy meal might be the best thing that you could do, as opposed to running off and getting food that may not be the best for your body. Just as a simple example of the way space could be cueing you. And by the way, any form of clutter is an expression of fear, Scott.
Why?
Because there's something going on, because clutter is a block and fear is a block, right? It's a block to a deeper expression of who you are. Mm-hmm. And what is that? So then you can get curious about why have I filled my physical space with fear blocks that are stopping me from having the rockin' out life that I actually want to have, as opposed to somebody else. You're not here to live somebody else's life. You're here to, and I know you got this, right? And it takes work. It takes, reflecting and no more laziness and like really taking it on. And you might fall down a few times in that process of discerning what the heck you're here for. Right? And it takes work to discern what in your physical space is blocking your creative expression. What's happening in your life and in your space that they're talking to each other? Because I promise you, they're talking to each other.
Before we go any further, I've got to ask, because you raised it, what's the weirdest thing that you ever found in someone's bathroom?
Oh, man. I haven't looked in cabinets, but I have absolutely, oh God, I think the hardest thing, this is an answer to a different question. The hardest thing was a shower curtain that was so thick black that I could not imagine how this human being was taking showers in that physical space. The black was, mold and ooh and goo on that shower curtain. Wow. That was scary.
Yeah, that's intense.
And huge compassion for the implode of that individual's life. And it happened to be an older gentleman. Mm-hmm. Wow. I mean, there were so many other things going on there. But it's
very scary and sad. Laura, what would you say to those listening to this who would argue to themselves, first world problems here? I was in India myself a few years ago, and I drove down a beach, and there were people that were literally living in little tents right across from the ocean. How can we justify this sort of concern with our space when there are people who have none? And are those principles that you're talking about even relevant for others? Because if they're not, in a way, I could push back against you and say, well, this isn't a universal practice then. And if it's not universal, why should it apply to me? That's sort of what my thinking is here. But
yeah, I
shoot back at me. Shoot back at me.
I totally get that. Because in our culture here in America, we have excess. Materialism has gone way out, and yet we have unhoused people. Right? In our own culture, let alone in the world.
Yeah.
But how I will answer this is by saying that humans, this wisdom it's ancient wisdom, Scott, 3,000 years ago. And the ancient masters went out into the world and they asked themselves, like a research question, where are human beings living that they're thriving? And they happen to be mountainous areas, right? And what they found is the people living at the top of the mountain, no matter what the structure was that they were living in, what did they struggle with? The winds, right? And the people living at the bottom of the mountain struggling with what? Floods, right? And yet the people living in the middle of the mountain, man, their lives seem to be thriving. And so that kind of like started this whole thing about we as human beings are intrinsically connected to the natural world. We have to be. Mother Earth sustains us. And when we get out of balance with that interconnectivity to the natural world, then things go kittywampus. And yes, I'm certain people, there's some people listening going first world issue, but it's not. These principles and basic ideas are practiced in every culture because every human being wants a haven where they get to thrive. And for some people, they thrive in a tent on the beach. Other people thrive on a houseboat out on the river. That's their sweet spot. And then there's those of us who think we thrive in a 6,000 square foot house for two people filled with belongings, but maybe they lost their soul. I don't know. Not for me to judge, right? But a question to ask ourselves, right? What got out of balance? So do know that these ideas are practiced and have been practiced in every culture, from the First Nations people to India. Most people want to create physical space in which they feel safe, they feel free, they feel comfort and nourishment, and it could have 1,000 expressions, or as many expressions as there are on the planet.
Explain to us in very basic terms, for anyone watching or listening who is just not familiar with it, what is Feng Shui?
It's the art and practice of arranging your physical space to enhance the quality of your life.
What are the principles behind it?
That everything is alive with energy. Everything is connected by energy, and the energy in everything is always changing. And then there are 3 practices that flow out of that, and I'm happy to share those too.
Of course.
Okay.
You can't leave us hanging on a cliff like that.
Right? Right?
Yeah, you just got me hooked.
Live with belongings that you love, that actually support your life. Live with comfort and safety. A lot of furniture, for instance, is not designed for the human body. I don't know how many clients I've worked with that they're like, yeah, my child, they've got the sharp cornered coffee table and, everybody's cutting their shin or they're stubbing their toe at any rate. So comfort and safety is huge. And then organize and simplify, because organization allows for mental clarity. You want to be in your zone and in your flow of your life and of your work life. Wow. Organize what actually supports you. So you can reach for that pencil or pen or have that phone or laptop or whatever it is that the tools are that you use to produce and create are right there easy to find. You're not stressing out looking for whatever, right? To have your life work. And there's amazing stories about that one, right? The people who lose their car keys, and it's a chronic, persistent issue of the search for the car keys every single day. Like, wow, that is life energy that could pour into creative expression. Just a small example there. So those are the practices, and they're very meaningful.
Well,
and
yeah,
really
but with regards
grounded.
to
Yeah, sorry, go.
So that's okay. So with regards to the last one, though, tyranny of the tidy is what I'm hearing. I like having a little bit of this and that around, and so might some folks listening.
Yeah. Okay, so here's another two other ideas that I love so much. So there's active chaos. And that may be what you're talking about. So when we're actively engaged in creating something. So I'm going to use the example of a meal for anybody who loves to cook. And you may have listeners who really love to cook. The kitchen gets messy, and then you have the cleanup afterwards, right? That's active chaos. And then there's this thing called passive chaos. So active chaos is necessary. It's important. You've got to have, the paints and the artist thing going on, right? If it was just like tidy to the point where you couldn't create, you're suffocating yourself, right? Because like if you saw my office right now, you go, okay, that's active chaos, right? It is not neat and tidy and all, streamlined. Now, depending on the personality, right, then there's passive chaos, Scott. Passive chaos is the chaos in your space that sits there and sits there and sits there. It's the sink, back to the dishes in the sink that have sat there all week long. We're not even kidding, right? That's passive chaos, because now it's become a block to your inspiration to cook that delicious meal. Right?
I hear you. Laura, how can we begin to build a space that supports our connection to our purpose if we are busy at a job that's meaningless, or if we're not in a place where we really understand what our purpose is yet? How can we even begin to move forward?
Oh, such a great question. Sometimes the tiniest step that you take to open a drawer, put the timer on for 10 minutes and open a drawer that you've declared the junk drawer and start emptying it out. Mm-hmm. And you might, in that process, find a treasure that reminds you of something that you actually love to do. The other idea is to make a list of everything that if you had a childhood where there were activities that you actually got to enjoy, and I know not everybody had that kind of childhood, but maybe it's one thing. Maybe it's just that you got to read books alone in your room, or you got to be out in nature and you really loved that. Connect with that experience of what that was. I have discovered that when people get in touch and reclaim what I like to call the lost selves, it's not just like the inner child. It's like all these people that kind of got lost in the dust because of whatever, right? Expectations of other people, or, don't do that and don't do this, and, or whatever happened, right? That it's a reclaiming of the treasures of what that person really genuinely enjoyed and relished. Because we kind of live in a upside down culture that says you're not supposed to experience joy. So you're supposed to suffer. And so then everybody's like, oh, well, if I'm not suffering in a meaningless job, then, what is, and it's like, wait a minute. What happened to joy and love and purpose? So have at clearing a corner of your office that maybe just listening today, has been bugging you. I mean, if you really, really looked underneath it, right? And honestly, I have talked to business groups, mixed business groups, men, women, and the men will come up to me and be like, but I got these records from the 70s and I'm not getting rid of my stereo.
Of course.
And I'm not getting rid of I am not letting go of my boombox. And I'm like, I'm not telling you have to let go of your boombox. Yeah. Keep the things that you genuinely love, but let go of, take those steps to let go. So a lot of it is letting go and then connect with what's in your space that you actually love. What's in your space that inspires you? What painting or article or furniture just jazzes you? Yeah.
If there were 3 things that you would suggest anyone watching or listening take away today, what would those 3 things be? I invite people to see their physical space as a metaphor for what's happening in their lives, in their work life, in their relationship life, in their emotional life, in their pursuit of wisdom and knowledge and self-discovery. That would be one. So see your space as a metaphor. Give yourself permission to engage in activities that you actually love. And I mean love, like you relish them, you thrive, you come alive. Okay, that's a whole bunch of ways of saying that it's just so much fun. Kind of like today, this conversation. The third one would be, maybe look for the ways that I guess I'm just going to say it this way, which is kind of weird, but it's going to come out this way. Maybe look for the pain points in your life and in your space, because inside the pain points and those painful spaces and nooks and crannies of your basement, closet, drawers, whatever, wherever the clutter might be hiding, you'll actually find, you might discover in the pain points your deeper purpose and passion for living. It's beautiful. Laura, where can folks find out more about you?
Oh, they can reach me at I'm cherishyourworld.com. And I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram, although I'm attempting to figure out Instagram. I'm still learning.
Well, it is a space just like any other, and I'm sure you will figure it out beautifully. Thank you so very much. Laura, it has been great taking a ride with you today. Thank you for joining us. And for everyone tuning in, if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review on Apple or a comment on YouTube. And I will see you next time for another ride down the Purpose Highway. When you're racing down the Purpose Highway, we want to make sure you're healthy and happy every step of the way. That's why we're proud to partner with It's NOLA, 21st century plant-based healthy granola snack bites made with real ingredients and audacious flavor. It's NOLA crafts small batch hand-rolled granola balls that are vegan, gluten-free, and naturally low in sugar. It's NOLA's delightful bites come in 3 flavors: luscious cranberry coconut, sassy mango masala, and dark, decadent, chewy chocolate. It's NOLA is available to both individual customers and for wholesale accounts at itsnola.com. That's ITSNOLA.com. Guests on this show are already enjoying this delicious snack. Check out It's NOLA's website for yourself and find out how good it is.